I've mentioned a few times in the past things like wordplay and stuff like that, that my relationships have often involved at one level or another. And I mean, it's something that happens over time. Um, a silliness, a playfulness, a childish approach to everything. That childishness is really important to me, actually. I'm not sure it goes away, but it's some of what I see in youth, honestly, is someone who matches me in that childishness and hasn't really been corrupted entirely by the travails of, adult life. In our case, in the case of my past wife and I, my recently passed wife and I, a lot of it relied on what might be called code words, right? But I feel like we did it more than most people did. I feel like we may have even done it more than I've done in other relationships, even with my first ex-wife, which was equally long, maybe a little longer, not much. I think we lasted 11 years. Not married for 11 years, but, same thing, essentially. We moved in together almost immediately. Immediately. The day we met. The morning after the night we met. And in this case, too, our interactions were always living together. Have I been in relationships where that hasn't been the case? My first girlfriend and I, I've had 2 marriages and 2 other long-termish relationships, years long. My first girlfriend and I essentially moved in together without actually doing so, where it was like, yeah, maybe there was a week or 2 where things were not that clear, but immediately it's just, there's the joke about lesbians, coming over for the night with their entire apartment or whatever. I feel like I'm that kind of person, one way or the other. I mean, that's what I need from someone else. I need that. Yeah, let's just we sink in so deep so quickly, and to me, it's almost inconceivable, like, to be anything else, to form the kind of bonds that you want to form with much less interaction. Like, I know of people who are dating for, months, years before they make that kind of decision, and they slowly slip into it. It just doesn't happen with me. But anyway, that's not really where I wanted to go. I'm just thinking. There was some extent of that. There's always some kind of extreme silliness in everything, that I'm related to. And honestly, it was with my first wife that I realized what I really liked, and I found this with my last one as well, was this almost childlike approach to things. They were very different people in terms of being able to function in society and all that kind of stuff. But that childishness was there. And I have that too. I have that very much so. And I don't mind, being kind of looked down on for mine, but I so cherished, seeing that kind of, just a certain level of happiness, of something that's just not appropriate for an adult. You know, the kind of bouncing in place about seeing a little animal or whatever. Just so much apparent joy in something, even if it's transient and so small. And I don't do that at all, right? Like, that's something that's missing from me. I don't think I did that as a little kid even. But that always brought me a certain kind of happiness, and it's not something I want to give up. It's not something I look forward to being without. But more than that, you know, I think with everyone I've dealt with, there's a certain kind of silliness. I can remember going for walks with friends in college where we'd make up words for things, or misappropriate words for things is more like it. You know, things like show someone the deal. Well, we had a particular stick that was called the deal, and that was kind of a code word for beat someone with the stick. We never beat anyone with the stick. It was just sort of a bro type of thing. Now, here's one of the places where we were silly. Me saying that, bro, means I have to go do some pull-ups. I'm going to refrain until after the video is done. But that's something, you know, my recent wife and I used to have as kind of one of those little code word type things. It had an immediate reaction. I said that, well, I don't like that word, so I punished myself, but then it just became this pattern in life for no great reason. It was just part of the silliness of our existence. Similarly, friends. Friends initially were little toys that we found that moved around by accident, and then they started moving around not by accident, which is to say, we would move them, one of us would move them, and we would pretend not to, right? You know, I mean, just silly little shit. And then eventually they stopped moving around so much, but they're still friends. Seeing faces and everything, you know, we'd see a couple of houses that very clearly, you know, looked like an emoticon type, an emoji, sorry, type of face. Yeah, the one in particular that was used a lot over on Aspie Chaos. I don't remember who brought it. I don't remember if Starbuline or Soph brought it over, but it was just and Starbuline would actually be previous to Aspie Chaos. I think it was, but they sort of played with that a lot and had picked that up. Well, we were seeing these in reality, and then, you know, when we were watching archaeology shows or shows about architecture and stuff like that, or we would see these buildings, and they would just we'd see faces everywhere, and we'd see them on maps and all like geophysics for archaeology, and we'd just be noticing them all the time, and it would just be this thing, sort of this competition to see faces, but not really a competition, just a silliness, and a lot of things like that. With the code words themselves, there were just so damn many. I've referred to a few, like Mr. Bean, who was basically whoever the presenter was on a timeline video from the BBC. Because Tony Robinson was in Blackadder, and he was in a lot of the ones we were watching, especially, and then he was in the Time Team series. So he was, you know, I was playing this, getting everything confused intentionally kind of thing. But then it just became a thing. And it was funny because the goalposts would move around so that it would confuse her. Another one, Fancy fancy houses are one with a porta potty outside of it, and fancy buildings are ones with it. The porta potty itself wasn't fancy, but for whatever reason, I don't know why, I can't even remember, what triggered this off. But these things just sort of become ingrained and become a part of everything. And I know everybody does this to some extent, I'm sure. But it felt like we took it to an extreme, where quite often things we said wouldn't be understandable. And it wasn't like, a code word for a sexual act or something like that. I wouldn't be opposed to that kind of stuff, but that's just not where our relationship was fixated that way. Others, that was in there, but it was more just, we had our own words for all kind of stuff that were just so misused. Maybe because somebody mishears something once, or somebody is pointing to something and you see something else. University land. So I was walking someplace with her, and I said, "This is university land." And from then on, it became kind of like a theme park idea. And whole sections of the town were, "This is university land." And major blunders that cost us a day's walking got their own taglines and stuff like that, and it just so many damn things. And there was just this constant amusement level for this kind of stuff, and of course, the silliness of the characters I would bring to life. Some of which were incredibly racist. I'm not going to go into those, but racist in many different ways, not so much more playing with accents and stuff than anything else, but also taking on a persona that fit that, and sometimes there would be some insulting aspects to them, but it was just play, it wasn't something I would want to do in anything other than such a small setting. And the reason is that it was never there to offend, and in a way it was to make fun of people's preconceptions and stuff like that. I mean, when I say racist, I mean culturist, languagist, I mean just everything, and sometimes I would pull weird things out of everywhere. So medieval Chinese idea of China as the center of the universe. And I would be propounding on that in modern terms with a Chinese accent. And I think, absolutely not something that you could get away with on a stage or anything like that. But on the other hand, that kind of silliness and everything, and exaggerations of trains of thought, and then arguments that were just absurd. And I do those online as well, cutting things to the extreme, but then realizing to some extent that they're correct, investigating things, topics that I'd feel uncomfortable investigating with someone I didn't trust so much, that I didn't feel like we're kind of two children trying to make sense of a nonsensical world type of thing, right? Where we would say the darndest things like kids do, especially me. So you get a highly filtered me, and I know that it doesn't seem that way at times, but man, someone who really knows me and that I'm terribly comfortable with gets something much worse, where and I'm willing to consider ideas that are almost verboten, and some of them come out, like when I make arguments like, if there is a good to the universe, right, all signs point from science, etc., that if there is some purpose to the universe, it's the heat death. It's this complete like segmentation and disruption of all order into nothingness, which is in itself, you say, well, gosh, you're tearing apart all order, but in another sense, everything becomes uniform and and completely static. So there's almost a dualism there that's intriguing. But anyway, these things take forever to build up, and that's one of the reasons, like, maybe they didn't build up as much with my first girlfriend, with my psycho ex. There weren't enough years, and there wasn't enough total contact for this to just kind of be bouncing back and forth, and the creativity and silliness to all just become part of our existence in quite the same way. But not having that hurts. It hurts a lot. And the idea of building it all back up, building up, just like the compromises, building up those compromises to where that comfort level is there, and you say, you know what, we've had all our drama. Fuck it, man. This is what we've settled on. It's not what either of us really wanted. But this is how you grow old together. You come to these compromises. You try things out. They didn't work, whatever. Maybe they seemed to work, but now they're just sort of fond memories in the background that every now and then trouble you. But that was a different relationship back then. Getting to that point, getting to that 10 years or whatever of shared experience, it just seems like such a huge fucking burden to deal with again, And yes, the payoff for getting there is that passion, that excitement of a new person. Not the excitement of a new person, the first day you meet them or whatever, which honestly, I have very little of, I mean, yeah, very, very little of that. But the excitement of a new person, months in, years, a year or two in, whatever, as you're really learning how that person plays in their mind. That goes away over the time in a large extent. So, there is a way, there is a treat to get you to that stability. I just don't know that I have the energy to go through the drama. There's always drama with me, man, early on. I mean, for years, right? There's I don't know if I can take this shit, And once the compromise is made, I think it does settle down into something that is kind of uninteresting and that one vaguely regrets, but you can't let that go. And I don't know. I don't know where I can find the kind of strength to deal with people again in that sort of way. Especially when everything is temporal. I always insist on everything to remain exactly as it was. Every change hurts. Every change damages me. But thus is. This is not going where I was hoping, as is so often the case. And it's a pretty day. Maybe I can move myself out to go for another walk and revel in my loneliness. Cheers.